Hey everybody, I'm Invisiblekatana, and I wanted to do this video because I recently read the fan theory about Westworld, and I'll give you guys a warning. Technically, it can't be a spoiler. It can only be right or wrong because it's just a fan theory, but if you don't want to possibly know anything, which admittedly based on the evidence seems like it's pretty accurate, which is still pretty cool even when they do the actual reveal. It'll be awesome to see that it's factually correct. But if you don't want even possible pointers towards what the storyline, one of the big reveals at least, might be. I won't even say which character, but for a certain character, which I'll probably have that for the thumbnail, but for a specific character, if you don't want that possibly spoiled for you, then you should not watch this. You shouldn't bother looking at any of the fan theory stuff, because this one seems right, but that is your official warning. I wanted to do this video because I found this fan theory today. I love the show. I've reviewed the first 3 episodes, and I've been having a great time with them. I'm just like every time I'm just waiting for the next episode to come out. And I'm on Facebook, and I saw this fan theory about, this is who the Man in Black might be, and it was like, this theory might actually be correct. So I'm like, all right, I'm looking at stuff, and before I actually went to the article, I was just reading, because you can click on the article and see what every random person on Facebook has posted. And so a bunch of people are saying, like, if this is right, that would be pretty awesome, and I think this could be right, and this actually makes a lot of sense. So I'm like, this might actually be something really cool, and I don't mind it because it's still a theory. So even if it's true, it's just like, whoever came up with it is, they noticed some good stuff. But the theory is that the character William is the Man in Black, but 30 years younger. And I thought that was really cool. And when I first saw it, I was like, okay, there's basically the 2 biggest things as far as I'm concerned is the fact that the logo is different, which I didn't notice during that scene. Like, they make a point to show it, but it was so fast. I was like, oh, this is just a new character. I was more concerned with the fact that we were seeing how people got to the park, because that was one of my biggest questions during the first episode. So I was like, oh, this is basically answering one of my biggest questions. So I wasn't looking at anything. I was just like, okay, this is how people get there. This is who they meet. This is what happens. I wasn't looking for extra details. I didn't even notice that the symbol even came up. All I noticed were the canyons, and then I was kind of following them, even when it kind of stayed on the old symbol for a little minute. And it was like, okay. So in that picture, the Westworld logo is different than what we see in some of the other scenes. So it's like, it's basically 2 W's mixed together instead of 1 W with a big W on the outside of it, and it's missing the big W is missing like the middle section. And I was like, that in itself is like, well, that's all I need to see, really. That's about as big of a clue as you can possibly give someone. It's the logo for the company, and it's different here than it is right here. So that in itself is all I really need. But there are other scenes that show up pretty much in the same episode. I think it was all in episode 2. When they go through the section where everyone gets off the train and they meet the hosts, that same section is shown a little bit later on, or at least a portion of it is shown like later on when Ford goes up into the elevator. It kind of looks like the same portion, but the actual area itself seemingly is shown to almost exactly in the very first episode when they go down to like the way lower levels, and it's like, oh, it's like, it looks like a mall that's completely run down. And I was like, okay, those could be the same areas. And so going through it, was like, okay, these are interesting little bits here and there. And I was like, but that doesn't make a lot of sense, because based on the end of the 3rd episode, and there will be spoilers for all 3 episodes that are current, I was like, it's weird because based on the end of the episode, it just made a lot of sense. Dolores ran into William and his brother-in-law. And then I was thinking, as soon as I thought that, I was like, well, if he's 30 years back and forth, why can't she be 30 years back? Like, why can't her storyline be during both times? Stuff like that. Or why can't she, why can't we be seeing 2 different storylines for her character? So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I think this theory definitely works. And I have a little list up here for other little stuff that I may have forgotten. One thing that I noticed, I didn't even think of this because I didn't have this theory in my head, but during the last episode, and I said this in my review, I was like, oh, during the Arnold, the little flashback with Arnold, they had this segment where they had all the really old hosts, which would be like about 30 years old or so, and the host that showed up, and it's like she has like her own little moment. She has like an umbrella and she looks at the camera and she smiles. I was like, oh, that's the host that met William when he came. I didn't even think about the fact that she would also be 30 years old. I was just like, change hosts around all the time. Maybe she was there and then they took her out because she wasn't fit for the world, so they just made her a host like that. But I was like, no, it fits the theory a lot, because why else would she be in the flashback and have such a specific focus if it weren't for the fact that she was just a much older host, because that's when he first showed up. So I thought that made a lot of sense. The part, and they definitely play around with this, especially for Dolores. But the reason I thought it could work, where they're jumping back and forth between her timeline as well, is that she could, I feel like, I was trying to remember, but I don't believe they ever really specified what her storyline has been. They never really specified if she had different storylines like other hosts have. We just know that she's the very first one. But what if she was always the daughter? She was just always Dolores. She was the daughter who was always at the camp. She was always being, attacked, or like her father was always being killed and stuff like that. And they do this really early on in the episode where it was like, alright, that's a really confusing scene. I'm not sure what just happened. And I thought, and I think this is kind of how it played out, but they have a segment when she finds the gun that she found in the old episode, or in the last episode, and she sees it, and then she has like a flashback. But then when it goes and she closes the door because she freaks out, or the drawer, and she opens it again and there's nothing in there. It's like, that was a weird scene, but what if that was her 30 years back? Like, it just made a lot of sense to me. I was like, maybe she was in this house the whole time. Like, who knows, if they had Sweetwater the whole time, why wouldn't they have instantly built a bunch of these characters and houses? And with her being the oldest, it makes a lot of sense that they could easily jump back and forth 30 years and he would have met her, which is why he has such an infatuation with her in that first episode, where the man in black shows up and he's like, all this time we spent together and you still don't remember me. It makes a lot of sense that, because obviously William was like falling for her and stuff, and then they have like the really sweet moment where his brother-in-law calls him and he just tips his hat, and then he catches her at the end of the episode, which makes it seem like, oh, it's all the same timeline, because the characters just hadn't been together. But based on the scene she was having, which obviously, especially that final scene, she was jumping all over the place through time, because it was her capturing her memory. So she takes off, and it's like, oh, it seemingly makes it so that this is one straight narrative where she was here at the house, because they make it very clear example, and this is kind of, one of the things that's really cool about it, because they have those hints, and I think they made it super obvious with the logo. That's like the biggest thing where it's like, oh, that just makes it obvious. It was clearly a different time period. But even if you take that out, there are all those little subtle things, and what they do to kind of trick us is they show the dude who is trying to basically kidnap her with the two thieves before, the dude who was like in all gray, who was freaking out when Teddy showed up. He was like, I said I wanted something easy. They show him at the end of the episode, but then they show that she's gone through that experience before, where she has actually killed the guy, or someone's killed him and she's escaped, and maybe she ran out before the player did, and then that same person came around the corner and shot her. So she knew it was going to happen, and so she takes off, and they make it seem like she took off and ran straight into them. So who's to say that wasn't just one of the really old times when she was randomly shot? That could have been the first time she, was shot, like that at least, in the stomach. And so when they make it where she realizes that and she takes off, that's in the present. But when they go to, 30 years in the past, it just looks like it blends together, because it's nighttime. She rode off on the horse and she freaked out, and she passed out in William's arms. And I was like, you know what, that makes a ton of sense, because they had that weird moment in the beginning where it's her in the present, I would assume, with the revolver in the drawer, and then it jumped to the past, and then the other segments. And there's some other stuff, and like I have it on a little article here, and it actually talks about the little stuff with the city itself, which I thought was actually very cool. So there's Sweetwater, and they have it where they talk about how there's a different person recruiting people to do different jobs. So they have, let me see, it was like an army captain or something like that. They talk about how Maeve doesn't appear, like a lot of the characters don't show up. And I thought that could easily just be random stuff, because, every time they show these two characters, it's just these two guys. And they kind of made a point of showing certain things, like when the guy showed up in the second episode, William bumped into the random dude at the beginning, But in the first episode, Teddy did that. And in this episode, they kind of made a point of showing, or seemingly making a point of showing, that characters always meet up. You know, like if they're a certain distance, it's like they're basically calculating when they should get to Sweetwater so that they can actually meet each other. And maybe that was just meant to seem that way. That's what I thought until thinking about the fan theory and them jumping through time. And these were two different narratives. So it was one section where we have, you know, Teddy and Dolores meet up. And so it seems like it all fits together. It's like, okay, he got his new narrative and all that stuff. And he ran into her in the village. And so he was like, you know what, they bothered you. I'm going to teach you how to shoot. But she couldn't do it. And then that actually is a totally different timeline. And then they jump 30 years into the future, or into the present, I guess. And that's when we see it where she's actually glitched. And she is able to shoot. Because her character was never meant to. And so that was in the past when she was technically still fixed. It just seems like it's all one storyline. Where it's like, oh, Teddy's doing his thing. He's got his new story and stuff. But technically nothing changed with him. He was always that character where he came in and saved her. It just seemed like it made sense that he showed up later because it was like, oh, we have to give him this new narrative. And then we, you know, do that. Which technically is what happened. But the scene where they go off by themselves and he tries to teach her to shoot is actually, you know, however many years in the past. It might not be 30 years, but it's sometime in the past. It's just like a random in-between slot. So I think this theory actually makes a lot of sense that William is the Man in Black. They have some stuff going on in the next episode. Lawrence, who is the dude that the Man in Black mentions, like, you know, I know all of this stuff about you. He's going to be hanging out with them in the next episode. So if this is not true, then I think we'll figure it out by the next episode. I think the next, you know, episode 4 might be the one where it's like, alright, especially if you're looking for stuff, it's like, okay, are these characters showing up here? Are they showing up there? You never really know. Like, the show has a bunch of mysteries. Even if that is true, and the character William is the Man in Black 30 years in the past, it still doesn't explain what the heck the Man in Black is doing. So it's like, that's just a random cool reveal that explains why he's so crazy and stuff now. And it might actually give the answers to what he's looking for with this maze, but it's like, it's, even if that's technically true, it's like, it still doesn't explain what this maze is, how he found out about it, why it even matters. Like, how is that a part of the game, but only he seems to know about it? So there are like a million little questions here, and this might somehow involve some stuff with Arnold. I don't know. Still a ton of mysteries, but I thought it was cool. I personally think this fan theory might actually be correct based on some of the stuff I noticed even before the fan theory, like mentioning the host that greets William. She was in that flashback. She was one of the oldest ones. And then that kind of, I mean, it was a simple little scene where it's like, oh, it's a black hat and a white hat, or black hats and white hats. But that kind of makes a lot of sense. Where it's like, maybe that was the point of that scene. Like, that's why, it's not because this guy is like, oh, this is my first time here and I'm exploring this world. This is a big deal because this dude is like the Man in Black. So it's like, here are the black hats, here's the white hat, and this is him when he's, you know, the good guy and he doesn't want to, you know, kill anybody. And then when he becomes the villain, he goes, you know, full Man in Black. So I think this theory is correct. I would love to know if you guys think it's right. There are a couple other random things here. Like, the wanted posters are different. So in the part with Hector Escaton in the very first episode, apparently they use like fancy red ink for the Dead or Alive stuff, and he's worth $500. But during the last episode with William, he goes looking for people, and it's all just typical black ink, and they're only for $100. So it's almost like inflation type of thing. And it's like, that's a really random thing, but if you look for all the little details, they're in there for sure. So I thought that was cool. Like I said, you know, that's why I gave the warning. I personally think this fan theory is correct. I don't think it has that big of an issue as far as spoiling too much, because even if that's true, like I said, that's just a cool reveal. The real mystery is, what is his deal? Like, the maze is way more important than this being him in the past. That's actually really awesome if that is the case, which, like I said, I think it is. And now it's going to be hard to tell what's what, though, because with his character, it's like, yeah, this is 30 years in the past. But with Dolores's character, it's hard to say, because in the past, you know, with her being her character, that's why I think the next episode will kind of define whether or not this is really him in the past or not. Because if she was never meant to shoot, the scene where they have them at the they're like holding up a stagecoach or something like that, and it's 4 people. So I think it's William, Dolores, William's brother-in-law, and then I believe it's Lawrence is the 4th person. Why would she be holding a gun based on her narrative? I would assume that that would never happen, but maybe if we see it in the past, this was before they did the 24-hour wipe thing, and it was like, okay, you went, and I'm still trying to figure that out, if they literally wipe every 24 hours, or if they only wipe, because they say narrative loop, but if a person is with them, like in the first episode, the man in black was with the dude Kissy. That guy still remembered him after, more than 24 hours because he was interacting with a host and he wasn't killed off yet, and he didn't have his narrative loop technically finished, but he ended up interacting with a host or with a player, and so that changed his whole thing. So his memory wouldn't be wiped until way after that, until he was actually killed off. So, excuse me, that's another way they could do it, because they kind of already showed that with the Man in Black in the first episode. So maybe she ends up with them, and even when she wakes up, it's like, hey, you're with us. And maybe she'll say, like, what happened, because she will have been reset. And then they explain, like, you just fell out of the, you came out of the woods and you just passed out. So there are some things, and I think the next episode will be the one to really explain it. But I definitely want to know your theories. If you guys have had any theories. I think the Man in Black was the main mystery. And also now who's actually screwing stuff up, because somebody's messing them up in the present timeline. And the past is just showing the Man in Black in transition, I guess, if that is truly him, which, like I said, based on some of the random little things, like a bunch of stuff I didn't notice, it might be true. So I think it makes a lot of sense, but we just have to see how certain things come together, because there are a lot of elements, and all it takes is literally one scene. Like, the whole thing is like, oh, Teddy wasn't here, Maeve wasn't there, this happened, that happened, Dolores is the oldest, so it makes sense that she'd be the only one to show up. And it's been shown with the Man in Black that he knew who Lawrence was, because clearly Lawrence is a really old one as well. The female host that met them when they first got off the train and stuff like that. The location of the train, and, like, if you go back to the first episode, where it looks like that might have been where the train came in, because it's not the exact same area, though, based on what I remember from the first episode, because it shows an escalator, like, it's like a big scene, but it looks like the escalator is on the right side, but it seems like it's all, like, at an angle. And when they got off the train, it was like the train's here and the escalator's, like, right there. It seemed like everything was, like, streamlined, but from what I remember from the first episode, it didn't look like that. Like, the things were, like, at an angle, and it looked just like a mall. Like, I was looking at it, I was like, oh, this just looks like an abandoned mall to me. But maybe it's just because it was so run down, and that's just the old portion that they got rid of, which clearly they did. That's just where they put the old hosts, and then it's like, whatever, leave water running and all sorts of crazy crap. So I don't know. I thought it was a really great theory. Honestly, I think it's 100% correct, especially with the Westworld, the logos being different. Like, once it's that, it's like, well, that's basically the one hint that you need. Once you see that, it's like, no, that's it. This is in the past. That's a totally different character. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Man in Black, but it would make a lot of sense with him being, like, the really good guy, and then he becomes evil. That's like just a Shakespeare type of thing, and, like, that just makes a lot of sense if that was actually the case. And this was my theory from the very beginning. They talk about, oh, it's been 30 years since there was a fatal accident. I said that in, like, the first episode. I was like, I'm pretty sure this dude was there during that fatal accident. Like, or in the second episode, that's when I thought that. I was like, that's why he's looking for this maze, because there's some part of him maybe that believes he can get some sort of answer or something like that. But I think his brother-in-law gets killed. That's, like, my theory. That was, like, the first theory I had. I was like, okay, these two show up. The Man in Black talks about, oh, it's been 30 years and stuff like that. I was like, alright, this is like, someone in his past died. So if this is him when he's younger, it makes perfect sense, because his brother-in-law gets killed, and, he's the one who ends up, like, kind of going nuts because of it, and, like, he loses his wife and stuff like that because it's his brother-in-law. So he gets killed when they go hang out and stuff. His wife flips out and leaves him, so he's got nothing now but a buttload of money. And that's why, he stays in Westworld, because he doesn't have anyone anymore. So that was my theory, and I think it kind of fits in line with why he would transition, because he saw someone die in this actual world. And now it's like, even though they're fake, he kind of gets, like, tiny piece by tiny piece, he gets his little bit of revenge by killing off all these different hosts all the time. Because, you know, and that might also explain why he gets whatever he wants, because it's like, you guys killed my brother-in-law, like he was blown away or something crazy like that. I want to be here for free. Like, he mentioned, like, you know, he doesn't pay a bunch of money, but he doesn't like to, you know, he doesn't pay a bunch of money for it to be easy and stuff like that in the first episode. But I don't know, maybe he gets like an insane discount or something like that. Maybe it's still $40,000, and you know, 30 years later it increased, which I would assume it would, because when they mentioned the $40,000 thing, I was like, that's not a lot of money. That was the first thing I thought too when his brother-in-law mentioned it. He was like, you know, we don't spend $40,000 a day, and it's a day, so it's still a ton. But I was like, that's not a lot of money. I was like, I was expecting it to be like over $100,000 or something, and I didn't think it would be per day. So, you know, I guess it kind of came out to the same, you know, crazy amount of money. But 40,000 a day, even that, I was like, that still doesn't seem like the most ridiculous amount of money that you could charge, because you've literally created a world and, you know, the things that they make. But 40,000, even with inflation, you know, old 40,000, 30 years ago, $40,000, there's still a ton of money. So I don't know, but like I said, I personally think this theory is actually correct. I don't mind if that is right. Whoever came up with that theory, I mean, all you'd have to do, once you notice that logo, like if I noticed that logo, I would have been like, something's different. Like that would have triggered me off too. Like, this is not the same logo, but I didn't pay attention to it. So I think once they did that, they kind of did it. They kind of spoiled themselves a little too early, because I think, honestly, if they left that one part out, I don't know if this theory would exist, because that was like the biggest thing. And maybe people would have noticed it with the third episode, because like I mentioned, I saw that the host was the same. I was just like, oh, she's just an old host. But they have those, so it doesn't really matter, because Lawrence existed before and he exists now. So I still wouldn't have thought, oh, that's, you know, that was her in the past or whatever. I wouldn't have even thought that. But I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out throughout the rest of the season. They might not even get revealed this season, but we'd love to know the theories you guys have had, what you think about this theory for sure, if it's right, if it's wrong. I think episode 4 will be the make or break point once we see these 4 characters together and how that actually plays out. And you know, we'll learn some stuff for sure. I think the next one will be the answer for sure. But want to know what you guys thought about, you know, this theory, what theories you guys have, what you think about the series in general for sure. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.